Firebase में problem. Okay. So I hope not that you guys get problem with Firebase, as we've already covered it a lot in like 2-3 sessions also, right? So again, if you have any problems, please try revisiting that part and it will get fixed. Okay. All right. So furthermore, as discussed in last sprint, we are doing that package installation and all for just for now. Going forward, things will be much easier for you. I promised you guys that, right? Right. So currently, if I go and create a React application for myself, what I'll have to do, I'll have to attach CDN links, right? And so far, what CDN links are we attaching so far? Development, okay, okay. So you might be saying about React and React DOM, but from dev wale CDN links. That's fine. That's fine. Anything else? Babel, Babel. Anything else? Excuse, excuse. Anything else? No. So if someone might have gone and watched some videos on other platforms also like YouTube or something, you might have seen that the way we write code, they don't usually write code. Have you noticed that? Right? Even these packages, even these libraries or packages that we attach in our application, we are not rather not installing it, we are just attaching it, kind of like हम just उसको pin कर रहे हैं in our application, right? We are not installing all that. So that's what happens when you go directly with these links. But there's second way of approaching these things, right? But finally, the purpose is to be take all this setup, compile your code into a one single format that your web page can read. Yes. Yes, take everything, compile it into a one single format that your web page can understand. Initially, this was done by something which was called Webpack. Initially, I mean like around 3, 4, maybe 5 years prior. This used to happen wherein we had something. I mean, you can visit the website also, Webpack, and you'll see that over here, this is something that used to happen with it, right? So can you see what's written over here? Like this is just the summary of what Webpack does. Notice anything? So basically, what this thing is saying that there will be a file. Let's say this is our file. This is HTML file. Now this will have dependency with a CSS file. Will have a dependency with a JS file. That's possible. Yes. No. Yes. Then this is the JS file. There's a possibility that this has dependency upon another JS file from which it's importing stuff. Right? Then this JS file had an image जिसमें SRC was feeded from a JPG file. Yes, that finally ends up being creating a lot of stuff in a single application, and that is kind of difficult for website to understand कि where do I have to start from, right? वो यहाँ से start करेगा, then it will first visit this, then it will visit this, then it will load this and visit this, right? Similarly, what Webpack used to do, it kind of acted as a middleman, and what it did, it just compiled everything in this neat format. Everything will be separate. Whenever you need something, it will be just directly accessed from here itself. Clear? Clear? But this Webpack thing, again, writing this thing from scratch, compiling your code by using Webpack itself from scratch is like a very big task of its own. Because it doesn't need a lot of code, but the code that it needs, it has to be built with very like good knowledge of like kind of in-depth knowledge of your JavaScript from the point of view of not just development but production also. Right? So this thing was getting a bit tiring for usual users. So what we did was not exactly we, what the community did, given that JavaScript is open source, they created some ways of directly installing these stuffs, right? Matlab, you don't have to write anything or anything, you just have to write a command and these things will be done for you automatically. That makes sense, makes only sense because we have to automate stuff going forward, right? So this automation came in terms of CRA. Anyone heard about CRA? I hope you have. CRA के term में आया, right? What this was called, this was create React application, right? Anyone saw this? Anyway, so if you visit React's, your not legacy, React's official doc, right? Whatever we are going with currently. So if I click over here and okay, they have changed the platform. All right, so let's figure it out. Here's the installation, right? So over here, if I visit and if I go over here, if I want to create a new React app, it will show me that we have to start doing these things, right? It's directly supporting Next.js. Let me check. चलो कोई नहीं तो given that next is in like form right now so it directly goes for Next.js but what we used to do is we write npx, we write create. This was not next, I mean for now also it will work. You just have to write React app and whatever the latest version is. Once you do this, what क्या करेगा, it will create a React application for you guys, right? But it took a lot of time, right? Lot of time, by that I mean 3 to 4 minutes, right? And this was on Wi-Fi. If you go for like 3G or 4G networks, it might take 5 to 6 minutes also, right? So now this was also getting a bit tiring because think about this, you have a 45 minutes interview booked, right? You have like 10 minutes for intro and then you start creating a create React application. इसको time लेगा 6 minutes just for installing itself. So we don't want to go that way also, right? So what the community did, they applied one more thing which was called Vite, right? Now what this Vite was, it was like you can call it as an HMR support, right? Basically what Vite does is it exactly does exact same thing what CRA does, but faster, right? That's how I can summarize it. Vite basically does what Create React app does, but faster, right? And what this HMR is, it's called hot module replacement. कहने का मतलब ये होता है कि whenever you install these things, ना, you have a page. These things are installed when you have an application wherein you don't want to refresh your page every single time. Now think about React. In React, do we want to refresh things? Because it's a functional component. If you refresh it, everything will start from scratch again. So do you want to refresh it often? No, the word we are looking for is re-render. Do we want to re-render our application often? Yes, so we need something that can re-render stuff without even refreshing them. That's why like this HMR does that thing. That's why Vite is supported a lot. Right? By a lot, I mean a lot. Clear? HMR hot module replacement. It should be in your notes itself. You can read about it, what it is. If not, then go and check on Wikipedia also. So you'll get an idea. Right? What it does, it kind of refreshes your page without even refreshing it from here. Right? It, you can say it re-renders your page. Clear? Clear? So finally, the point of this entire setup was that going forward, we are going to use Beat. We aren't going to use your CDN links. We aren't going to use CRA. Although if someone asks, you can use them, right? All you have to do is you have to just write npm, yeah, npx create hyphen react, right? Not next, React app, and everything will be same. Clear? But for now, let's visit Beat and let's try to understand key what it does and how we can start with it, right? So we click over here. Again, you'll have like whatever things that it provides. So instant server start, I mean, you don't have to run local host for it. It has its own local host built for it. It's like lightning fast HMR. It re-renders stuff very quickly, right? Plus it has multiple plugins and all. Slowly we'll start discussing that also, but let's get started with it. And I want to search for over here. So try Wheat online. You can try Wheat online, Stack Blitz and all. So basically, this is a simple template preset that you can use via Wheat. So let's say if I click on React, right? So it will take me to a platform, right? The older folks might know about something that is called Code Sandbox. Yes, right? So if you wanna go for this platform based, right? कि आपको you don't want to create application, React application directly on your system because you think it might take time, you can just go with this also. But again, given that you have time, I'll recommend if you'll start it on our system itself. Clear? So this is where you can visit it online. That's not something that we want for now, so I'll leave it. Over here, you'll see ki what templates are supported by this preset. So you have like your vanilla JS, Vue.js, React, pre-React, and lit and all, right? So for now, we just have to figure out about React, React hyphen TS. So this is React with TypeScript. So TypeScript will learn about it going forward, right? What TypeScript is and all. So for now, we have to just get the installation for it. Here it is. So basically to install your application, can you see this? What you have to do? Remember this npm. Remember npm. What npm used to do? It installed packages, right? So one of these packages is npm create Wheat at the rate latest, right? So let's just copy this and let's visit our application, right? I have just created a basic folder, nothing else. I'll open the terminal with it. And from now onwards, mostly we are going to use terminal, right? So here we are in P38 RCT. We'll be entering sprint 2 and S1, S2, D1, right? And over here, S2, S2, D1, and here we'll start with that, right? So I hope it's visible. So I'll just paste that code that we just copied from the documentation, npm create Wheat latest, and I'll press enter, right? Chase command not found. Okay. I think npm is installed in bash. Let me check. So no. Oh yeah. So pressing enter, I'll start installing this, right? Installing this application. So let's see what it does. So it says need to install the following packages. It is asking us if we are going to install these packages. Do we have your permission? We'll say yes, you do. Then it will ask us what's the project gonna be. I'm just gonna go with Wheat project. Maybe uh, let's go with this one, right? So once we have picked the name Wheat project, you can put any name. Just keep in mind everything should be in small case and hyphens will only be used, nothing else, right? So what's the framework that we are going for? Again, Wheat is mentioning it as a framework because it takes everything together, but you know that React is a library anyways, right? So we'll visit React and we'll press enter, right? Now it will ask, ki, how do you want your React to be, right? So do you want it with TypeScript? What SWC is, we'll talk about it later. For now, we just need it in plain JS, right? Plain JavaScript. So I'll just press enter over here and there you go. Your application is basically set it up, right? Now all we have to do is we have to visit the Wheat project, right? I think they created the project in sprint 2. Maybe हम day 2 में enter नहीं किए थे. Okay, anyways, I'll just put it in day 2 folder and we'll do, let me check, sprint 2 इसमें है sprint 2, okay, so D1 and we have the Beat project. Okay, all right, so it's all set up. We'll just visit Beat project, we'll clear everything and we'll run npm I. So what npm I does, it basically install all the dependency that we have in our application, right? So guys, here's the Beat project. If I open it, this is what your npm create Beat application install, right? So if you can see this package.json, right? Can you see that there are some dependency that it already has, like React and React DOM? Yes, so were these things that we were using. Please start, repeat from starting. I'll create the notes for you. Don't worry. Just अभी follow up करो. Right? मैं एक बार सब कुछ एक जगह compile कर दूँ. Don't worry about it. Why we have to write only smaller letters for project name is that specific? Yeah, it's kind of a convention. Right? Okay. So in dependency, currently we have two things, React and React DOM. Were these things that we had to install to run an application previously also, even in Sprint 1, we had to attach these things? Remember, right? So here, these dependency are attached. All we have to do is quickly set things up. So once you have done that, you'll have to do an npm I. It's nothing but npm install. Clear? Well, press yes. And, it will quickly install everything over there, right? So let's see. I mean, yeah, you guys can do it together with me. So the only thing that we have done so far is we visited Beat, right? We visited the guide or getting started thing, right? Let me show you once again. We just clicked on guide and we just scrolled down and here we found the link. We just copied it and pasted it in our system. All right, so it's done, right? It's already installed. So to run it, all you have to do is you have to write npm run dev, right? So we are in web project, all right? So let's create on it. And you'll see that our application is running. Once you see this, right? Once you see this screen, it basically means that your application is ready and it's running on which port? 5.73, right? You don't have to anymore run a live server or anything. You can just visit this and your application will be running over there. Clear? Clear? So before moving forward, again, let me just compile whatever we have done, right? First thing first, we visited Vite and we did Control Shift V here also. And we installed this. Basically, npm create Vite @latest. Right? And then the next step was to visit, by visit, I mean cd into the project, right? Because once you install it, it will create another folder. So you have to visit that folder and then do npm I over there, right? Basically, installs all the dependencies you see in package.json, right? And finally, to run the application, I'll have to run npm run dev. Clear? Clear? So everyone, I want you all to create an application in your system and just visit this thing. Just have this thing open. If once done, please let me know. One in channel. Done, right? What about others? Before npm I, you have to do this. So again, I would highly recommend you start checking the documentation out, because there's a possibility that you will forget this, right? Because last time I taught React, it was around like 5-6 months back. So even I forgot all these commands that were there. That's why whenever you're learning about something, learn where you can access it when you forget about it. That's why I show in documentation even where they are placed. Although in notes you will have everything. But the point is, if you want to become a developer, you should be aware in interviews, if you forget about something, where I can find it. That's why those CD and links documentations were there. Got it? All right, fine. So over here, everyone's done till here. Your application is running. Any error so far? Mostly the errors are you're not visiting the folder. That's why you get an error. What about others, guys? Why it giving counter? I'll discuss about that also. Take all right. So basically, by default, you might be seeing this application has a kind of a counter over here, right? So if I click on this counter, the count increases also. So they just create a template for you. This is an application and it's running properly. If I show you where that code is, do you guys remember what was the entry point for any application which was written with the help of a markup language, that is HTML? The starting point, index.html, correct? So can you see any index.html file in this new folder that the command created? You see over here, index.html. Will open it. Does it look familiar? Looks familiar. Why? Is there one thing that we're usually doing? It's by default done over here also. क्या है वो? The root div that is being created, and you'll see that there's this src also. And this src basically says us कि yeah, we are accepting things from main.js. So let's go and check this main.js. What does that contains? If I click on main.jsx, is it something that we have seen previously? Yes. Yes. What's it? We basically give it a render point from where you have to start rendering, right? So remember when we used to do root equals to react dom dot create root and all, and uske baad we did root dot render. They have done that thing in one line itself. What they have done, react dom dot create. They have accepted this, right? And they here itself appended or chained another render method, and they have rendered this application. React dot strict mode थोड़ी देर बाद बताऊं, right? Ask me once when I start showing you console, right? जब मैं आपको console दिखाने लगूंगा application में, तब just keep in mind guys, you have to ask me. अगर नहीं पूछोगे तो नहीं बताऊं. Console में you'll see कि when we console something ना, it comes out weird, right? तो वो क्यों आ रहा है? जब आप मुझसे वो पूछोगे, then I'll tell you कि what this react dot strict mode is. Clear? All right. For now, let's just skip past this. Just think of it for now as a fragment. Remember fragments, react dot fragment. So just think of it in that fashion forward. Now, in here, do we have something that is we are familiar with? It has an app. It has an app. And where are we importing that app from? Again, as I told you, now going forward in next unit, we'll have import and export a lot. In previous unit, I told you guys, you'll see we are going to do import and export every day now, right? So is this just the basic import statement that we usually do? Because you have seen that in our index.html script has a type of module. That means module is enabled. Clear? So over here, you will see this app installed from app.jsx. So let's visit this app.jsx. So over here, whatever you are seeing on UI, isn't that's what written over here? वही चीज है क्या? देख के बता. Just look at it and tell me. exactly the same thing, right? And it has CSS also. It imports CSS, app.css from this, right? So let's do one thing. Let's remove all the CSS. Now we'll visit again. The CSS is gone. UI looks different. Let's put these here. CSS looks different. All right. Just give me a second, please. एक second. हाँ, हाँ, ठीक है. All right. And again, if we visit app.jsx, even though CSS has changed, the functionality is working because these things are there. So let's do one thing. Let's remove everything. Take and let's conquer this. Let's just say my React application. Right? So do we have all this stuff over here? Right? There must be another CSS file that might be messing this up. Let me check. Let me remove all this. Something is centering this. Index.css. All right. So let's clear this also. Okay. So now we have our primitive structure wherein we have these stuff, right? What we can do is main dot chalo abhi delete nahi karte, let's just keep it over, right? So now we have the basic setup that we usually do with our app application. App में जो करते हैं, we have just a count state over here. We are returning a fragment. We are writing JSX in this. So going forward, we are going to create, rather than .js, we'll be creating .jsx file, wherein we'll write HTML and JS in a single file. Clear? So this is something that everyone's familiar with. We're back at that platform wherein we just start writing the app ke andar things. Everyone, right? So make sure that everyone has this setup done in their application. And I mean, you know that we can even do this count over here. It will show the count also. Clear? Let's refresh it and it will set back to zero. Remember, right? So itna setup, everyone try doing it quickly from your end, and then we'll move forward. We'll start creating different components now. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes. I'll have to do something. Just get back. Please make sure that you have this setup. Yeah. Done, guys. Terminal is showing error. Okay, you can share screen. Quickly share it. Ajit, quickly share it. No, no, it's enabled. You can share. So you have done that. मतलब, have you installed the application? All right. So take it. Go down. Scroll down. Just start typing in here. Terminal में. Right. Clear. Enter. ठीक है. अभी in day 5 you have created it. Guys, please focus up here. You are gonna make this exact same mistake. I'm pretty sure. So please focus up here. You're in day 5 and here you are doing npmi. You're not audible. Please. Can you speak?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible now, sir?
Yeah. All right. So open day 5 folder in your sidebar. Huh? So in this day 5, have you created another folder named cd day 5?
Just by mistake, sir.
हाँ ठीक है, that's fine, but this is the folder now जहाँ पे सारे कोड रन होंगे, तो you'll have to visit that folder, so you'll have to go and write cd in terminal. The cd basically will mean कि you are gonna change the directory, and what's the directory name currently? It's cd space day 5 presenter. यार तुमने नाम ही गलत रखा है, जाके उसको रीनेम करो, फोल्डर को रीनेम इट, presenter. नो नो स्पेसेस, नो स्पेसेस,
Okay.
अगर स्पेस देना है तो हाइफन दो, नो स्पेसेस. ऑलराइट, आई डोंट थिंक यू कैन डू दैट आल्सो. एनीवेज चलो cd and write your folder name. All right, and here do npm.
Is this all right, sir?
Yeah, that's fine. npm won't deprecated basically means कि some packages might not be supported. It doesn't matter to you. Now write npm run dev. Fine, so your application is running on that particular thing. Clear? All right, chalo. You can stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
तो गाइस मेक श्योर यू आर इन प्रॉपर डायरेक्टरी, नहीं तो काम नहीं करेगा. ठीक है. ऑलराइट, I have a doubt. We are not importing app.css in main.jsx. Then how its style is changing in UI? Because index.app.css. Where is app.css? This one. So initially we were importing it, right? In app.js initially, here I have removed all the code, but you remember initially we had imported your where is it? App dot, अच्छा बगल में, तो app.css. Remember this? We initially did that, right? So due to this CSS file is attached to this app file, right? And then this app was being called in that main.jsx, right? यहाँ पे this app was called, so by default it will apply there also. Clear? Because it was applied in it. All right, fine. So shall we move forward? All right. So in this setup, you'll see that initially, last sprint, mein what we used to do something like this, right? Equals to React. Because we were attaching stuff, that's why we were not able to import it, because हम उसको module में convert नहीं कर पा रहे थे. The reason being because we had to set type as text/babel. But over here, we don't have to mention the type. By default, type is module, right? So we don't have to worry about that anymore because React is taking care of everything from now here onwards, right? Here onwards, we'll leave many things to React, or actual declarative programming with help of React is starting here on. Clear? Chalo. So here the one thing that we're discussing about is this React, right? जो install हुआ है, from there we are importing a object, and that object will have use state in it. So usually you might also see something like this wherein people import React from it, and then from React they'll import other stuff in this fashion. Right, so that's fine. You can do that also, but you can, if you have option to directly destructure that object, why not go with that? Right, so we can just directly do use state over here also. Clear? And you can simply use that state from here itself. Right, so abhi let's do a simple stuff with it. Shall we create a basic counter with it? Right, so yeah, let's do that. Let's have a div over here, and in here for counter, what's the setup that we need? Usual 3 tags. Remember, a button, right? This is gonna be your decrement button, right? h2, h2 बहुत बार कर लिए. Shall we try it with input this time? Input के साथ try करना है, because h2 we have done a lot. Chalo, let's try it with input. We'll have an input tag over here. It's going to be self-closing, of course. And then we'll have button over here. Button over here, which will be increment. Right? So you have a decrement, you have an increment, and you have an input which will accept stuff. Now for buttons, guys, everything that we have learned so far, it's going to be exact same. The only thing that is going to be different is कौन से setup में काम कर रहे हैं. Right? So how do we call events? It's still JSX, it's still gonna be same. On click. Right? And once you're clicking it, what do you want to do? You want to do count plus 1. Right? Right? But for now, you can't just directly do count plus 1 because count is a state. Right? छोड़ो, वो भी छोड़ो अभी on click के लिए. How can I show this count in this input? Because it's empty. How can I show that count in this input? Use value attribute. Value attribute. Right? So we'll have that value attribute, and in this we'll assign the count. So by default, that count will be present over here. Right? And let's do on click over here. And whenever we are doing on click, what I can do, I can just simply do set count, and this will be whatever count we have plus 1, need minus 1. Right? So if I click on decrement, it will keep on decreasing. Similarly, I'll just do the exact same thing here on click, and this will be set count, but this time this will be count plus 1. Right? So now we can increment it and decrement it. Right? So basic simple count setup done. Yes, I want you all to do that too. Quickly, just try this out. Ki you are getting accustomed to this application format or not. Quickly करिए guys. Working, done. All right. And I hope everyone can apply a few more validations over here. If count goes below 0, you want to disable it or something. Right? So you can do that. Can I take previous? Yeah, you can. You can. Can I take pre? अरे यार वो काम नहीं करेगा ना. When you do this previous, right? ये previous is not इस set count के अंदर का previous. It's the event. Right? तो on click का event आएगा. What you are trying to ask is, you're trying to ask this set count के अंदर can I do this? So yeah, you can. Clear? That will do also. That will be fine. Clear? Got it? Vishal? Clear? This is what you were trying to ask, I think. क्योंकि अगर यहाँ पे आप previous use करोगे तो this is gonna be your event. ये तो on click का event देगा. Clear? And if I want to disable it, guys, disable it at 0. How can I do that? Where is React in line 1? Which React? This React. It has been installed. Right? आपके system में installed है. It will be present somewhere in package dot this log.json. Right? It will have multiple dependency. Just trust me, it's installed there. Clear? And बस वहां से आप चीजें मंगा रहे हो. Is it React or React.js? I mean, usual name React hai, but by default, if you ever think about it, it's React.js only. Clear? But यहाँ पे you'll just have to write React. Clear? Anything else? Comfortable with this setup? Everyone? Everyone? Now, the second thing that comes over here is कि basically, initially what we used to do when we are creating different components, given that you have also given evaluation where you had one page and then uske baad a product detail page pe ja rahe. So these components were representing a separate page, separate function for them. Yes. So initially what we used to do, we used to write that function over app only. But going forward, given that we are following module-based structure, what we'll do whenever we have to create a separate component, now we'll create a separate page for it, right? So let's say if I want this counter over there, so I'll just pick this counter up, I'll go and I'll create a separate page for it. Now, usual convention is that you create a components folder, right? And in this components folder, I'll have counter.jsx. And in here, I'll have to paste this code. But before that, will I have to create a function component, right? So let's create that component. This will be called counter, and yeah, we'll return it and we'll return this div, right? So we already have this div which has these three tags, so that's going to be fine. Now, why isn't this counter visible on the page? Why isn't it visible? Because the root file is empty. Yes, the app file, it's empty. So यहाँ पे I'll need to put this counter.jsx counter. Yes, yes. So what should be the next step? Should we export it? If we wanna accept it there, import it there, we have to export it, right? The two types of export were there, right? One type is already happening in app.jsx, export default app, right? Default export. Now, if you're using default export, you guys know default export, export, you can just export one function. Doing named export, you can do multiple. So let's try named export over here, shall we? So let's just write export, right? So this will export this counter. Yes, now let's visit app.jsx again. And over here, shall we import that counter? So import counter from components slash counter dot jsx. Clear? And we'll just append this counter over here. So counter, yeah. So think you don't need to do JSX over here. Let's check our console. Count is not defined. Oh. Achha, use state is not defined. So rather than doing drilling over here, or we can do drilling also, right? We can do a prop drilling over here, right? We can write count equals to count, right? And यहाँ पे जाएंगे in our components, we'll just accept that count. Remember this. We'll just accept that count and everything will be fine again. Increment or decrement, right? But prop drilling over here, we are not sending any updater function. This set count has to be there also, right? So let's send both of these things. app.jsx में वापस जाते हैं. We'll send count and we'll send set count also. Set. We'll go back to our counter and here we'll accept set count also. So set count and everything will be fine. Clear? So prop drilling. All right. Default export, it basically means कि if you're doing a default export, right? Let's say कि I hope you guys know कि how many exports you have. I mean, those who have learned from me, they should know the export you have two different types of, like export and import both. You have default export and you have named export. Yes, when you do default export, you do something like this. you'll create a function and you'll do export default and that counter function. Clear? You do something like this. Let me just clear it so that we don't get an error for everything. You'll do something like this. But let's say I have another stuff, right? Let's say I have another function. Let's say, what can we call this function? Display. Display. Let's call it display. And what this function does, it does nothing. It just returns h2 with hello world. Right? So in this case, I'll go and try writing another default export statement with this display. So this will throw an error, right? And the error will be that you can't export like default export, only one export can be written over there, right? So if you have to do something like this, rather than going for default export, what you can do, you can just export it in this fashion. Export it in this fashion. So this will be your named export, right? So in this way, you can export multiple things. Now, if I go in app.jsx, right? Not just counter, I can even import the another function, display, and I can show it over here also. So display. Clear? If you didn't remember named and by default export, I hope you got it now. Again, kind of a refresh. Here extension like .jsx is not required for import as we done in vanilla.js. No, no. Because again, there's this compiler, right? Again, I'm not exactly explaining you एक line क्या करता है, but this beat.config.js is like the master thing. ये सारी चीजें ध्यान रख रहा है. It's like the manager जो कि compile कर रहा है सारी चीजें. That plugin that we have currently, it's of React. अगर आप कोई और एप्लीकेशन इंस्टॉल करते हैं जैसे कि एंगुलर और समथिंग, एंगुलर का मुझे पता नहीं कि इट सपोर्ट्स और नॉट, बट मे बी रिएक्ट विद टीएस, तो वो डिफरेंट प्लगइन अटैच कर, राइट? तो दिस इज काइंड ऑफ अ ब्रेन ऑफ एवरीथिंग कि जो हो रहा है, लाइक योर वी यूज्ड टू डू सीडीएन टाइप ऑफ थिंग्स, राइट? तो इन हाइंडसाइट इट विल बी डूइंग ऑल दैट स्टफ. Clear? So going forward, you don't have to manage ki how things are happening. You just have to import stuff and you just have to create it in this format. Clear? Any doubt still here, guys? Be it with Vite, be it with how we are importing, exporting, or be it with how we are differentiating the components now. Everything's clear? All right. All right. So I have a very small question for you, nothing much. All you have to do is you'll have to create a parent component, right? Parent component you don't exactly have to create. We just have this application over here. So here you'll have counter is declared, but its value is never read. So basically you might have imported counter, पर आपने उसको कभी use नहीं किया होगा. That's why you get an error. Clear? The parent may, let's say you have an array of multiple objects, right? So let's say A1, you have B2, you have C3, you have D4, and you have E5, something like this. What you have to do, you have to basically send this in another component, in a child component, and you have to map over all of this and you have to just show the key and value pairs in this format. So UI में ऐसे दिखना चाहिए, key equals to A and value equals to 1. Can we do this, guys? इतना सा काम कर सकते हैं? Everyone, in your app, you'll have this array, and in a child component, which will be kind of a display component, wherein you'll show on UI in this format. Everyone, you guys have 5 minutes. Please try to do this. And अगर आप chat में paste कर रहे हो, तो I want it in this format. You'll paste app.jsx ऐसे लिख देना, and then paste the code. And then once the code ends, just write the and then your let's say display.jsx, right? And then whenever the code ends, तो इस format में paste करना. All right, guys, you have 5 minutes for this. Quickly try doing this. Sir, while importing any component, why to destructure it? ठीक है, तो अगेन रिमेंबर दैट डिफॉल्ट इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट की जो हमने बात की थी, राइट? एंड दूसरा वाला कौन सा था? नेम्ड, नेम्ड एक्सपोर्ट। तो जब हम नेम्ड एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं ना, बाय डिफॉल्ट वो फाइल क्या करता है? लेट्स से कि हमने नेम्ड एक्सपोर्ट में वी एक्सपोर्टेड टू थ्री फंक्शंस, राइट? एक था काउंटर फंक्शन, एक था डिस्प्ले फंक्शन, एंड एक था शो डेटा फंक्शन। ये सेंस बनाता है कि तीन डिफरेंट डिफरेंट फंक्शंस थे, तीनों को नेम्ड एक्सपोर्ट किया हमने, लिखा एक्सपोर्ट काउंटर एंड ऑल। ठीक, अभी क्या होगा व्हेन यू आर एक्सपोर्टिंग इट इन दिस फॉर्मेट, वो फाइल क्या करेगा? बाय डिफॉल्ट इट इट अंडरस्टैंड्स कि आई क्रिएट एन ऑब्जेक्ट, मैं एक ऑब्जेक्ट बनाऊंगा एंड उसमें आई सेंड दिस फंक्शंस इन दिस फॉर्मेट, राइट? तो सीधा वो फंक्शन एक्सपोर्ट नहीं होता है, वो फंक्शन क्या होता है? इट गेट सेंट इनटू एन ऑब्जेक्ट एंड वो ऑब्जेक्ट एक्सपोर्ट होता है। तो जब आप इंपोर्ट करते हो ना, यू कैन डायरेक्टली जस्ट इंपोर्ट दैट फंक्शन, पहले आपको ये ऑब्जेक्ट इंपोर्ट करना पड़ता है, राइट? सो मैं यहाँ पे ऐसे भी कर सकता था, आई कुड हैव डन ऑब्जेक्ट ओबीजे, राइट? तो ये वो ऑब्जेक्ट होता है एंड यहाँ पे आके फिर मुझे लेकिन लिखना पड़ता है ओबीजे डॉट काउंटर, राइट? उसी तरीके से ओबीजे डॉट डिस्प्ले, इस तरीके से लिखना, ठीक? बट हम इस तरीके से लिखना चाहते नहीं है, राइट? बिकॉज अगेन कुछ फंक्शनैलिटीज होती है, तो हम क्या करते हैं? वी कैन जस्ट डायरेक्टली डीस्ट्रक्चर दैट ऑब्जेक्ट हियर इटसेल्फ, राइट? तो वो ओबीजे को यहीं पे डीस्ट्रक्चर कर देते हैं और फिर काउंटर और डिस्प्ले हम वहां पे लिख देते हैं। क्लियर? दैट्स व्हाई वी डीस्ट्रक्चर इट। गॉट इट और नॉट? समझ आया? While I'm importing file counter, it says file already exists. So maybe you might have already imported it. Done, guys? During upliftment of updated data by using set data, it will uh, re-render only child function or both child and parent function. So you're doing upliftment, right? So let's say कि here is the parent and here is child and here is another child. ठीक, इसमें एक state है and you're uplifting in this parent. The reason to uplift a state in parent will be that parent को वो state use करना पड़ेगा, right? The only reason कि आप uplift कर रहे हो to use that state in parent. Now if you change this state here, by default वो state यहाँ पे भी change होगा कि नहीं होगा? Yes or no? right? So just keep in mind, जहाँ पे भी whichever component does a state change, that is gonna get re-render. तो ये parent re-render होगा and this child will re-render. Both. Wherever, just keep it as a thumb rule, wherever state is updated, that will re-render. अब चाहे आपने upliftment किया है या फिर you are sending it down, prop drilling. In this prop drilling also, अगर आपने prop drill किया and you have updated this child में state, this state is gonna changed in parent also. So both will update in this format. Okay. क्लियर है? तो यही चीजें कंपाइल होगी ना, एक इशू बनाती है कि फिर आखिर में अगर if we have a parent, of course we are going to share data with child. तो by the end of the day क्या होता है, सारे के सारे component ही re-render होने लगते हैं, right? तो there is again by third day you will learn about something that is called context, right? तो ये चीज बनती है to fix that issue. Re-render means only run that function. Yeah, you can think of it as that. Basically, think of re-render as refreshing the page without refreshing the page. Right? So basically refreshing the component. So yeah, at the end of the day, again, rerunning that function. एक बार उसके बारे में भी बात करेंगे, ठीक है, re-render and all. Alright guys, चलो. So I hope you can do this. This is very easy. I just give it as a task. You'll be able to try it out from your end. Okay, someone has done const data and you're sharing it. Ashutosh, correct. Very good. Anyone else done? Because I have to move quickly forward. We have some more topics to go. Chale, fine, guys. That's fine. Chalo, let's talk about something else. All right. So let me zoom it a bit. Let's visit Excalibur. Huh. So over here, I have to discuss something that is called component lifecycle with you. So any idea what component lifecycle might mean? Any idea? No idea. Component life cycle. अच्छा चलो, life cycle का मतलब क्या होता है? What does this word means? Life cycle. जीवन चक्र. Mount, unmount. Okay, okay. See the terms. Life cycle का मतलब क्या? एक बटरफ्लाई है मेरे पास, राइट? बटरफ्लाई, राइट? बटरफ्लाई का लाइफ साइकिल क्या हो? चलो बायोलॉजी क्लास. व्हाट्स गोना हैपन? अच्छा, मेटामॉर्फोसिस. अच्छा ठीक है, ठीक है. तो आई होप यू गाइस नो कि these guys are born as caterpillar or something. Like caterpillar ही बोलते हैं ना, caterpillar, right? So they are born like this, right? ऐसे नहीं, they'll be born in an egg of course, and then egg थोड़ा खराब बन गया. और तो this is their birth, right? This is their birth phase. उसके बाद क्या होगा? It will start living its life, right? It will like it creates a cocoon kind of thing. ठीक, अगेन जिनको नहीं पता है, cocoon एक काइंड्स ऑफ ब्लैंकेट की तरह वो अपने आसपास बना लेते हैं, ठीक है? And then from here it get converted into a butterfly, right? This is called metamorphosis or something, right? Again, not something that we have to think about for now. And then फिर क्या होता है? It lays egg, lays egg, lays egg, and उसके बाद butterfly dead, right? Butterfly dead, ठीक. बट मरने से पहले he left his child here. So now they will follow this lifestyle, right? So this clock of life will keep on moving. समय का पहिया चलता रहेगा, दिन ढलता रहेगा, right? ठीक है, चलो. So let's have a function, right? I have a function, it's called add. What it does, add नहीं, let's call it greet. Let's call it greet. So this greet basically greets you. It says, hello world, right? So is this thing born to life yet? अभी तक इसको लाइफ में लाया क्या? No, it's simply just an egg. It has to hatch. It has to be called. Remember, a function to start running, it has to be called. Yes, no, guys, एकदम से chats बंद हो गए. Either my internet is not working or you guys are not talking. अच्छा अभी आया. How many of us are present? Guys, कितने present है? Attendance लगाओ फटाफट. We are not talking. क्यों? Why? Okay, ठीक है. चलो. So this function to work, it has to be called. It has to be called. Right? Now अभी से ही एक analogy draw करते रहना with React. So in React, isn't this also calling a function? Yeah, just give me a second. Yeah. So isn't this also calling a function? Okay. So once we call a function, isn't this piece of code gonna run? Right? But before it runs, in hindsight, it does create something that is called FEC. Remember this? What was this? Functional execution context. Remember? Remember? Right? And functional execution context क्या कहेगा? It's gonna run each and everything. It's gonna run each and everything. And then once it's done, once we move from this line, what happens? This functional execution context is destroyed, right? So if I trace a function's life cycle, it will start with being called, then running the code in it, running code in it, then FEC getting destroyed, and then moving to next line. Was this the life cycle of a function? Right? Okay. Now you guys remember the second day I told you something that components in React are equals to function. Not triple equals to, just double equals to. Again, just for understanding, ऐसा कुछ होने नहीं वाला है कि आप component लिखोगे and triple equals to and double equals. It's not exactly similar, but it's like 90% similar. वो जो 10% का difference आता है ना, वो React की वजह से आता है. We'll discuss more about it. But can I say this? कि components and functions are almost similar. Right? So how would a component lifecycle look like? First thing first, that component will be called. So let's say display component is being called. This will be the start of this component lifecycle. This phase is called mounting phase. Right? Mount का मतलब क्या होता है? Mount पहाड़ वाला mount नहीं. Mounting a picture on a wall. What does that mount means? Create, hold. So you can say it as attach or hold or place. Right? Top view नहीं. You can call it as attaching, right? So let's say कि you have a wall and उसके ऊपर someone asks you कि mount this picture on it. Right? तो उसका मतलब वो बोल रहे हैं कि फोटो दीवार पे अटैच करो, प्लेस करो. Right? They are not saying कि दीवार पे पहाड़ बनाओ और उस पे चलो. Nothing like that. Clear? So fine. So basically, whenever a function or component is being called, it's mounting. What might that mean? It's mounting on UI. Right? UI पे this function starts to show. This component starts to show itself. But again, the context is created very well. You guys understand कि if I refresh a page, वो सारी चीजें again start from the very start. So of course, the component is created, functional execution context is also created. with these specific functions. But given that these components are controlled by React, what they do, they give us access to some tools which we can use inside that function also, inside that component also, that will kind of have different properties than your usual functions. One of these properties we have seen कि it saves the older state. So it provides some properties that are called hooks, out of which we have seen use state being used. So basically it remembers the state of that variable in different function calls. Yes, in different re-renders. Yeah, there. Remember this thing, right? All right. Now think about this. This is where mounting happens when you use these stuffs. जब आप use state use करके अपना component किसी तरीके से update करते हो, that is your update phase, right? तो ये mounting phase है. This is update phase, and finally, मान लो कि I have applied a conditional rendering, and by that I'm visiting another page. Not just this page, I'm visiting another page, right? So in that case, am I moving from this component? मैं component remove कर रहा हूँ from UI, right? तो once UI से remove हो जाता है ये component, that final phase is called unmount phase, right? So you have mounting phase, you have update phase, and you have unmount phase. Clear the different phases in React? Different phases in React. Is that clear? So basically, first phase was mount phase, second phase was update phase, and third phase was unmount phase. Right? Now this all makes sense up until asynchronous code starts flowing. What do I mean by that? Asynchronous code starts flowing. Think about this. You have a function, right? Let's just call it greet again. For this time, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write a set interval over here. Set interval. And ये set interval क्या करता है? It prints hello after every 2 seconds. Right? So even though this function is called, even though उसका execution context destroy हो रहा है, is this code still gonna run? Set interval. Once this function is being called, ये set interval mount हो गया. It's gonna keep on running and running and running. Right? तो in that case, चीजें हमारे function के control से बाहर जाने लगती है. Right? Function loses the control of these things and closure takes over it. Right? अभी के लिए उतना सोचना तो नहीं है, but again, given that we have written this statement कि life cycle is in this format: mount, update, and unmount will have to account for things that might happen in each life cycle phase. Right? Her life cycle phase में there is possibility that something is gonna happen. What I mean by that, if you're mounting some component and you're calling it, in that case, can you define state here itself? Or you'll do it in update phase wherein you'll update these states, and you won't do that here, right? Won't do that here. You'll keep this thing in update phase जहाँ पे you're updating the state and all, right? Similarly, when unmount happens, the state is getting resetted back to its default value. So let's say 0 was the default value. यहाँ पे आपने state को 6 कर दिया. Once it unmounts and then mounts again, वो 6 होगा या 0 होगा? It will be 0, right? It won't be 6, right? But there are other operations जो कि take place, which has to happen on mount itself. Think about fetching data. If you want to show user some data, do you want to wait for the component to mount पहले पूरा settle हो जाए, then start updating it? Do user have to click on a button to fetch the data? Do they have to trigger any event to fetch the data? No, they don't have to trigger an event. By default, the data should be shown. So basically, whenever the component is mounting, we have to fetch the data and show it, right? And there's a possibility that while updating it, we are updating this fetch data. we are maybe setting a set interval, and उस interval में every 2 seconds we are changing the page. First time first page API का first page we were showing, second time we were showing second page, third seconds पे we are showing third page. We are updating this also, right? So when things start getting this kind of out of way, we need something to manage everything on each particular cases. Whenever our system mounts, whenever our system updates, or whenever it unmounts. Yes, do you think कि if we have kind of a event loop जैसा manager जो कि चीजें manage करे without us worrying about it, will that be a great thing? Right? Because we did a fix on Saturday's PSC. हमने एक छोटा सा fix लगाया where what we did was we created that what did we name that state? I don't exactly remember it. हमने उसको false रखा था, and we did, let's say, flag. I think we called it flag and set flag, right? And once we fetched the data, by default we were saying if this flag was true, if this flag was false by default, then this condition was going to be true. We are going to fetch the data, but uske baad we were setting the flag to true, right? So in this case, what's going to happen? Very first time your flag will be false, will enter this condition, will fetch that, but once the flag has set true, it won't enter ever this condition. वो इस condition में कभी enter ही नहीं करेगा. So we are just showing all the data when our product is loading. That's it. We are not allowing re-renders. Because if we allow re-render, अगर हम if statement हटा देते हैं, then this function is gonna go in recursion mode. Right? Why would it go in recursion mode? क्योंकि if a state updates itself, will the component re-render? Yes. Now think about it कि आपके पास एक component है and in that you have set flag, right? अभी क्या हुआ? First time this fetch was called, right? It's not wrapped into anything, वो बस call हो रहा है. So you're calling this fetch. In here, of course, you're gonna have some data state, data and set data, which is holding that fetch data, right? थोड़ा यहाँ mix and match हो गया. Data, comma set data, ये होने वाला है मेरे पास. Now, whenever you set this data, re-render is gonna happen, right? And then again this function will be called, फिर से process होगा, फिर again re-render, फिर again this function will be called, फिर से process होगा, right? So that ends up going in recursion mode, पूरा re-render back to back होने लगता है, right? So that's why we did this fix, but this is not something that is viable because we'll need to call that API multiple times. Once we are calling it to show data, once we are calling it to search data, once we are calling it to paginate data, we'll have to do this function call, but we should have a command over it. Someone should be there to manage it. Yes, agreed. Have we created the need? Problem statement create हो गया है कि yes, we need something that can control all this, right? And here, guys, here is the introduction for useEffect, right? A hook that is provided by React to manage in each lifecycle state. Clear है? How will it do that? That we'll discuss, but why do we need useEffect? Is that clear? useEffect चाहिए क्यों? Is that reason clear to everyone? We need a manager that can manage the lifecycle methods. हर एक state पे, if you want to do some change, we need someone to manage it, and this guy is your manager. Clear? So next step will be to move towards, again guys, useEffect is very simple. Trust me, इससे simple आपने कोई state ही नहीं पढ़ा होगा, book ही नहीं पढ़ा होगा. ठीक है? Use state is very simple. So before we start with the syntax, let's take a break, and उसके बाद we'll start with the syntax. Clear? तो why तो clear है, how वो भी clear कर देंगे. ठीक है? चलो guys, have a break for 5 minutes and be back. Everyone, be back by 58. Prettier वाला part. अरे यार, I'm skipping that. I don't think it has to be in the session itself. I'll release a lecture for it, a small 20 minutes video for it. Okay. Okay. Fetching happens, is it in update phase, mount phase और unmount phase? It happens based on what you want. तो mount phase पे भी हो सकता है and update phase पे भी. अभी डिस्कस करेंगे उसके बारे में. ठीक है. चलो, everyone be back by 59 and we'll move on. All right, everyone back. All right. Okay. So the why part is clear to everyone, right? Why do we need useEffect? A hook that is called useEffect. Now let's see how do we use useEffect. Okay, useEffect को use कैसे करते हैं? So again, we'll be back into application creation mode, right? Let me make this thing a bit smaller and ठीक है ये चलेगा. Sure. So let's go back over here, and over here what we're gonna do, we are gonna remove these two for now, right? And in our components we'll create another component, and what should we call it? Let's call it show data, right? Show data. And over here let's have a component const show data, and what this show data does, it returns some data, right? Now that data will decide upon क्या return करेगा, but it returns some data. Now चलो let's check an API. So which is a API which we haven't used much. Let's go with placeholder. Pick some JSON placeholder, right? So we haven't used this much, so let's use this today. Have we used this assignments में? Yes, no, anything? नहीं बताएंगे वो भी. यूज किया है इंजेस यहाँ पे नहीं ऑफ कोर्स इंजेस यूज किया है, राइट? तो this has like a lot of data. Do we have something like posts over here जो कि post को fetch करता है? No. ठीक है. So let's say if I check this out, right? इसको check out करते हैं. Let's visit over here and let's have posts. So if I click over it, you'll see that we have these many data over here, multiple different posts. Clear? So her user based multiple different posts है, so we can use user ID to figure that out. That will be something that we'll discuss for now later on. But do we have a URL over here? So yes, we have a URL. What we want to do, as soon as our component show data loads, I want to show all the data on this page. There won't be an on click, there won't be anything else, right? So first thing first, we'll have to call this fetch. Let's just discuss about fetch for now, right? So uske liye, now we are using Axios usually, right? Axios use kar rahe hain. So let's do one thing. Let's append Axios in our system. So previously we did that by just pasting CD and links. Now onwards, we'll have to install that, right? We'll have to visit in my CD124 folder. Okay, I think I'm already in that folder. My bad. Let's visit sprint 2 sprint 2, and in that we have A1, and there we have read project, right? So why am I doing it in another terminal? Because I'll have to write installation code, right? And if I try writing it here, I'll have to do a control C. I'll have to stop this application. Again, to stop this application, you have to do a control C over here. तो मुझे वो करना पड़ेगा. I don't want to do that. So what I'll do, I'll just visit in that specific folder in another terminal, and यहाँ पे I'll access Axios. So now CDN में we just used to paste it. Here you will have to write npm I or install. I also works. I Axios. So you'll mention what package you want to install. Now, if you ever get confused what package do I want to install, I don't exactly remember it. So you can just write npm Axios over here, and you can visit their documentation. And over here, they will have mentioned somewhere how you can install it. So over here, we're using npm, the npm, we can do it. Clear? So if I press enter, it will start installing. right? And here it has been installed. Now, if we scroll a bit down, you'll see that once the package installed, you can import the library using import or require. So we'll go with import because we are using JS side of things. We are not using Node.js for now. I put it here actually. Okay. So what we can do over here is we can write import Axios from Axios, right? So you'll see that this Axios is now present in our system. So abhi we have written this exact thing wherein we are importing Axios from that specific package, and now we can start using it normally जैसे हम use करते हैं, right? So let's say I have a function over here, const get data, right? And what this function does, we have basically defined a URL over here, this copied URL. We have a URL over here, and what we have to do is we have to basically do a GET request on it. So how do we do GET request using Axios? Simple, Axios.get, Axios.get, right? And then the URL. That's it. We'll get the data. We'll get the data. Once we get the data, we want to do something in it. So we'll write a dot then. We'll get the response of that data. And what we'll do, we'll define a separate state for it. Data and set data. Right? And this will be use state. Now use state is imported from where? I haven't written it directly because it will by default import it. I want you guys to be aware about the syntax. So I'll write use state over here. Where इसने भी यहाँ पे import कर दिया. So use state will be imported from React. Make sure you know that, because what happens sometimes in interviews, they ask you to not use your VS Code, और अगर VS Code use करोगे तो वो आपको extensions off करवा देते हैं. तो in that case क्या होता है, autofill off हो जाता है. तो you sometimes, trust me, it actually happens कि you forget कि उसको कहाँ से install करना था, because going forward you'll install multiple things, like will install routes and all. तो वहां पे जो import statement होता है ना, they get a bit bigger. And from my own experience, I was giving this one interview and they did this. Prior to that, I didn't know कि something like this also happens. वो they can ask you to stop your extensions and all. I did that and I forgot कि मैं React का router कहाँ से लाऊंगा, right? तो I was like so embarrassed कि मतलब इतनी सी चीज, मतलब some things happen ना कि we just take it as ठीक है by default मान लिया हो जाएगा, right? But when the time comes, that doesn't happen. So that's why I really suggest कि जब भी आप कुछ भी use करते हो ना, try finding it out in documentation कि okay, that's fine. I can forget, right? Human memory है, it's not computer memory. We can forget, that's fine. But at least we can visit the documentation and we can figure things out from there on, right? And interviewers, they're not like कि आप documentation भी open नहीं कर सकते, they'll let you open it, right? थोड़ा बहुत impact पड़ता होगा, maybe, I'm not sure, I don't judge based on that to anyone जब भी मैं interviews लेता हूँ, but it usually happens कि you can just simply go and check कि how that specific syntax is, right? So that you can do. तो वही है कि you should keep a habit of understanding कि where you are importing that React from. That's a good habit. Chal. Now we'll use this use state, right? And over here, by default, what should be the data state? किस format में मिलता है हमें? We are not using Firebase anymore. Firebase. ध्यान रखो. We are not using Firebase. We are using JSON placeholder. तो इसमें कौन से format में? इसमें array, right? If we were using Firebase, in that case, you would have kept it as an empty object. Here, we'll keep it as array. Right? And now what we want to do, as soon as we get the data, now you guys know ki how does Axios returns the data. Remember, it returns the data with whole lot of jargon. What was the status code? Was it 200? And then inside it, it has the data in data file. इसमें रखता होगा. They'll have to do res.data. So what we'll do, we'll just do set data, and this will be res.data. Clear? Clear? And then of course, thank you. We'll have to apply catch also. Catch. catch, so error, and this will be console.log error. सिर्फ विक्रम को याद दिलाना कि डॉट देन के बाद कैच भी लगाना, राइट? आगे से सब याद रखेंगे कि whenever I write a dot then you'll have to tell me कि attach dot catch also. I'll miss things in this fashion but you will help me, right? Figure out करो, because industry convention is something that we have to start maintaining ताकि बाद में जाके दिक्कत ना हो, ठीक है? So now this fetching and all is done. Now why XU is not destructured in import? तो ठीक है, चलो एक क्वेश्चन बोलता हूँ, आप खुद उसका आउटपुट बताओगे। हमें डिस्ट्रक्चर नेम्ड एक्सपोर्ट में करना होता है कि डिफॉल्ट में करना? वो भी छोड़ो, पहले ये बताओ डिफॉल्ट एक्सपोर्ट कितनी चीजें रिटर्न करता है? हाउ मेनी थिंग्स डज इट रिटर्न? डिफॉल्ट एक्सपोर्ट 1. How many things named export return? Multiple. We don't know how many, it can return multiple. So if you know that it's just going to return one thing, can you not write the name directly? आपको पता है कि एक ही चीज ही आ रही, right? This is what happens. Again, I'll show you app.jsx. App.jsx, can you see कि it's exported default way, export default app, right? So if I visit main.jsx now, I'll show you main.jsx में you'll see कि that app is imported in what fashion? Default, right? It knows कि only one function is gonna come from there or variable, right? तो आप directly नाम लिख सकते, ठीक है? Clear है? All right, chalo. So back here, now the second step will be to, because this code is written in a function, this won't run up until this function is called, right? So now in this case, we'll have to run this function, right? Okay, so let's call this get data. But then again, are we not creating that paradox again, where this component is loaded, it's mounted, get data is being called, फिर get data क्या करता है? It sets the data and then again this set data is updating the component, फिर से re-render trigger कर देगा, right? So in this case, what we do, we use that use effect hook, right? So again, just like use state, use effect will be imported from React only. You can write a comma, and you can import it from here. Now over here, we'll write use effect. Now this thing takes two parameters, right? First will be a function, a callback function, of course. So CB function. I hope you understand callback function. And second thing, it takes a dependency array, right? For now, you don't have to think about it a lot. Just think in it in this term, key it is like this: use effect, and it takes a callback function. It takes a callback function and it takes an array. ठीक, अभी वो क्या है वो बाद में डिस्कस करेंगे, पहले तो let's write that syntax. So use effect, and inside this, what I want to do, I want to call this get data function. So I'll call this get data function, right? But again, get data function, I'll call it. So if I want to call it, I'll have to wrap it, right? I'll have to wrap it. So let's wrap it. ठीक है, and get data will be called over here. Now, by default, this array is set to empty, right? By default, this array is set to empty. Now, why is it set to empty? Because एक छोटा सा और again monologue होगा यहाँ पे. So basically, use effect is going to be present at each condition. जब mount हो रहा होगा component, unmount हो रहा, mount हो रहा होगा component, update हो रहा होगा component, and unmount हो रहा, right? When the component mounts, first thing that is checked in a component is always going to be your use effect, right? I'll call it use effect is being called, right? Again, let me just call it so that take the use effect will be called, right? And in this use effect, the very first thing that is checked is this dependency array, right? Now what does this dependency array means? Think about a URL. In that URL, let's say you want to search for something, you'll apply something like this, equals to some parameter, Remember this, जब search करते हैं हम लोग, right? Every time there's a possibility that this search is gonna be different, right? So by default, this array is kept empty. What empty array means is that this use effect is only gonna run once. And when it gonna run once, when the component mount, that's it. उसके बाद this use effect won't run. This use effect won't run any code that is present inside it. So this get data function will be called just once if the array is empty. But in this dependency array, you can pass states. So let's say you have another state wherein you're taking input of search functionality, right? And what you want to do is, as soon as user has put the input, you want to you want to run this fetch again based on this input. So in this case, what you'll do, you'll pass that input in here. You'll say कि whenever this particular state changes, I want to run this piece of code once again, right? उस पे आते हैं थोड़ी देर में. How that happens, we'll see that. But I not got it. ठीक है. So again, it's kind of something that थोड़े बाद में आएगा. तो let's do one thing. Let's first start with step one. Step one will be empty array. This dependency array will be empty. And what's the implication of this? Use effect only runs once. And when does it runs? When your component is mounted, right? So when dependency array is empty, use effect only runs once, and when it runs, when the component is mounted. Let's put it somewhere so that we can access it later also. So use effect के अंदर, let's say that dependency array is empty. So how many times is this use effect gonna run? Once. And when will it run? When the component is mounted. So basically, as soon as the page loads, this function will be called and this use effect will be done. We'll talk about second step थोड़ी देर बाद. Second point, we'll discuss it in 5-10 minutes. First thing first, let's talk about this first sentence. Now, once this page loads, if I write, if let's say I put this thing in here, and if I go and write a console statement over here. If I write console.log res data over here, I'll just print it when the component is mounted. Yes, yes, जब component mount होगा, then only I'm gonna print it. Are we getting anything in console? What might be the reason? We haven't imported it in app.jsx. So let's go back. In show data, have we exported it? No, so let's export it. Let's go back in app.jsx and let's import it. So that will be show data. By default उसने import कर दिया. Now, can you see that we are getting that data? Everyone, I'm going to clear this. I'm going to refresh the page. So again, the component will mount once again. How many times is that use effect running? Again, there's a small misconception that we'll have to deal with. All right. So some of you guys are saying once, some of you guys are saying twice, right? Vikram, याद है starting at half an hour में you asked me a small question. I told you कि जब console पे कुछ दिखाऊंगा तब पूछना. What was that question again? Strict mode. Remember strict mode, right? So guys, this piece of code is only running once. ये console एक ही बार print हो रहा है. But because in main React strict mode is on, what happens before running this application, right? In your browser, what system does, or specifically Vite का setup does, it runs this application once more. Not Vite exactly, React क्या करेगा? It runs this application from its own end very first time and it checks for any error. अगर नहीं, then it just prints whatever there was in application. And the second print is something that is what we are getting in output. That means कि in theory, if I remove this strict mode, that means I'll just get one console. Theory wise, if I remove this strict mode, no checking will happen. Right? Chalo, let's apply that theory. Let's remove it. Let's remove strict mode. So in this case, when the page is loading, are we getting just one console? right? So that's why React.strict mode is applied. It is basically there to check for errors before your entire code runs on runtime. At compile time, it checks for an error and it throws an error. Else, you can just go with app directly. So app के साथ भी जा सकते हो. That's totally fine. But if someone ever asks you this reason, because I usually ask this, why do we are getting two different consoles even though we're just printing it once. You know the reason. And what is it? What is it? React's strict mode. Clear? It basically compiles and runs the code instantaneously to check if there are any errors. Nahi to it just prints whatever there is in console. And this second statement is your output. Clear, everyone? So now again that question, how many times is this use effect running? Just once. And when is it running? When the component is mounted. Is that part clear to everyone? Sabko clear hai? Guys, what about others? In main.jsx, React is not destructured while importing. React means React only one file that, but in show data, React gives exporting two things. Okay. Main.jsx file, you said React React is not destructured. अरे भाई देखो ये React is an entire object. अब हम इस ऑब्जेक्ट को डिस्ट्रक्चर कर सकते हैं, राइट? बट देखो ये देखो, so in this React you're using react.strict mode, right? So what if I go and destructure it and मैं उसमें से strict mode कॉल कर लेता हूँ, तो in that case मुझे क्या करना पड़ेगा? I'll just have to write strict mode. The application works fine. ठीक है. Similarly, this React DOM is an object that is being imported from here. तो React DOM से we are using create root. So what I can do, I can just destructure it and get the create root directly. So now I won't have to write that again and again. अभी भी your application will stay. ठीक है. तो again they will do something for you, something if you need you can do. वो उन्होंने ऐसा किया क्यों नहीं? Why they didn't directly destructure it? Because we are just using these things only once. Right? So if you're using it once, why does it matter कि वो destructured है या नहीं है? Getting it? Getting it? Right? So again, if it's an object, it can be destructured. Don't worry about that. Clear? Clear है? अभी clear है guys? Yes or no? Anything? Quickly. ठीक है. All right. यहाँ पे clear है how unmounting and updating and like mounting, updating and unmounting is going on with respect to use effect. Shall we move towards our second point? Second point की तरफ बढ़े. So basically this is the first point. The second point says कि let's say we want to call this use effect once we do some changes. What I mean, something is present in here. Let's just call it a parent. Something, but ऐसे, right? So this means that whenever this particular state changes, what I mean, whenever para state changes, this use effect will run again. Now, how to prove that? What we can do we have let's create a quick counter, right? So let's say count. अच्छा एक काम करते हैं, why go with something that's vague? We have an application. ये second point ध्यान में रखो. Let's just show something on UI. UI पे कुछ दिखाते हैं, right? So again, guys, can you tell me what's the pagination of JSON placeholder? I mean, pagination may we have count that we maintain, right? And let's say we are on first page, we want to show 10 data, second page, we want to show next data. So that is an example of use effect 2, wherein based on a certain state, we have to change the data, right? So let's figure out what's the pagination for it, right? I think I remember it. Anyone tried pagination? Because I don't want to check the documentation for it. I mean, it's either page number, if I remember correctly, page number 1 and the limit as 10. right? It's either this or it's underscore. So let me check page number. Let me check. Okay. Posts. User ID is over here. I think we're missing the question mark query, right? I think we're missing the query. Posts query. Okay, okay. Yeah. So we're getting first 10 set of data in here, right? So basically this is the URL. Let's copy this URL and let's just copy this particular part because we are interested with this, right? So we'll paste it over here. Now, abhi our Vite application, if I refresh it again, it will just get 10 pages, right? So first set of data and second page of data. Now, what I want is when I change page, should I be changing the data, showing different data, right? So पहले तो एक काम करते हैं, let's just show this data on UI, whatever we have for now. So let's just show title, right? Title and ID. ID will be different, yeah. So let's get title and ID. We have set it the data over here. We can create a separate div, and in this div, I'll do data dot map element, and over here, title and ID. So we'll return another div, and wait, why is J6 isn't enabled? Div. Okay. And now in this div, what I want to do, I want to have a P with a B, and this will be title, and the output will be element dot title. And similarly, before this, here itself we can have ID also, right? So it can be like a serial number. So element dot ID, and after that I'll attach a dot, right? So over here you'll have this structure, right? Let's keep it in B. Let's keep it in B tag. So X will get this in B tag, and oh, it's already done. And we'll keep a space over here, right? Click. So this is what we are getting. Now what I want to do, I want to do pagination. So I'll attach two buttons over here. I need to attach two buttons over here. And if I click on update button, I'll get something. Yes, guys, pagination करना है या नहीं? करना है, ठीक? So let's have a div, and this div will hold that pagination setup. The pagination setup is nothing but counter, right? It's counter only, counter only. So let's get a button. Let's quickly do that setup. Previous page will have h2, and this will be basically showing next. The current page will have next page over here, right? So previous, next, h2 may let's create a page, right? So let's create a state. This will hold the page number. So set page equals to use state. By default, with what should be the page number by default, 0 or 1? 0 or 1? 1, 0 तो कोई पेज नहीं होता है. 1, all right. And here should be the page, right? So by default, we are at the first page. Now, if I click on next page, I should update this set page. So let's do that. On click, I'm doing set page, and this will be previous matlab page -1. And I'll just copy this entire set. I'll just paste it in this button. And this means we are moving to next page. That means +1, right? So next, and previous. Okay, this works. Now quickly tell me how can I disable it at 0? Quickly, guys, quickly. Disable कैसे करेंगे? Anyone tried for counter? Disabling for counter? Yes. So how do we disable it? Because यार disable तो मैं काफी दिन से बोल रहा हूँ आपको try करने के लिए. Okay, just tell me the attribute that does that. बस attribute बताओ. We can maybe get the logic. Okay, disabled. Is it like a key value pair? Is it a key value kind of feature? What is it? All right. Check MDN quickly. Just disabled. So don't you think we'll have to write logic for it? We can use ternary operator. Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, okay. So let's say if I go here, disabled, and if I try giving it a value. So basically, disable either can be true or false. Let's say if I keep it true. In this case, is this button disabled? Yes. If I keep it false, in this case, this button won't be disabled. Right? So what should be the condition over here at which it goes false? मतलब disable कब करना है? कौन सी condition? As soon as your page is equals to 0. Count नहीं, अभी page कर रहे हैं, page comma set page. Right? So next page is fine, but जैसे ही we visit 0, this page is disabled. Don't you think we should disable it at 1 itself? Again, correct. So as soon as we reach 1, this button will be disabled. So now for others, it will be enabled, but जैसे ही we visit 0, this will be disabled. Clear? Clear? तो pagination का basic setup तो हो गया. Next thing will be to update the URL based on that. So URL updation isn't a big thing. It's very easy. Rather than doing this URL outside, let's just put it here, यहाँ पे, and we can make this dynamic. So if I keep this as page, if I keep this as page, by default, what will be the page number? 1. So by default, we are gonna get the data of first page. Let me refresh it now. We're getting the data of first page. Should have unique key prop. Where should we have unique key prop? Here. So ठीक है, that's fine. That's fine. Element.id we are getting. Element.id is unique, so we'll give element.id. ठीक है, वो भी गया, वो error भी गया. Let me remove the console also. We don't need consoles anymore. We can do it now. All right. So this is the first data that we are getting. Clear? Clear? ठीक है. So if I click on the next button, will the page number change? Yes. So if I click on next button, page number will change, but the data is still the same. The reason being, even though page number is changing, is this fetch function being called? Is this get data being called in useEffect? No. So that's where this dependency array comes in. Whenever you want your application to re-render and run this useEffect once again for a particular state, right? In our case, it's page. What you can say, you'll just put your page in here. Now React will understand that whenever the page number changes, then you have to run whatever is in useEffect once again. So now if I click on next, you'll get next set of data. If I click on next, you get next set of data. Next, 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 again, next set of data. And if I previous, I'll get previous set of data. Clear? Similarly, this dependency array can have multiple things, not just one, multiple things. There's no limit. Clear? So point 1 clear. If it's empty, then that useEffect is just gonna run once when component is mounted. If this useEffect has some value in this dependency array. And what are these values? These values are these states. Once the state change, you want to run this use effect, put that in dependency array. Clear? Everyone clear? So this is just the basic functionality of use effect. बस इतना ही करते हैं, कुछ और नहीं करते. Clear everyone? Any doubts? No? And can you see how easy it is now to create pagination? Can I put more dependency? Yes, you're welcome to. You can attach as many as you want. Okay? But can you see how easy pagination is now? Right? Everything can be done directly itself. Right? So please, you have 5 minutes. Please replicate this code, and then I have one more small thing to discuss. तो जल्दी से इसको replicate कर लो quickly. How to place more dependency? Array में बस add करते जाओ ना ऐसे more इस तरीके से. ठीक है? It's an array. It's an array. All right, quickly try it, guys. I'm getting errors. Can you read the error? Read the error for me. What's the error? Maybe paste it in chat. I'll take a look. Fail to resolve import XUs from. अच्छा, XUs के import statement में कुछ problem है दोस्त. Try installing XUs. Check if XUs is installed in proper folder. वो इस folder में होना चाहिए. Meet project. ठीक, तो वहाँ पे देखो. Guys, quickly do it, please. Quickly. एक और छोटी सी चीज के बारे में बात करना. Side effect, yeah, just wanted to talk about that only. The side effect is nothing, we have done that. The fetch we are doing na, that's called side effect. I'll just place the definition in your mind ki what are side effects and all. Just give me just note it down and we'll do it. So guys, please quickly, two more minutes. That's working. All right, fine. Okay guys, done. All right, chalo. So all right, let's quickly discuss that side effect wala thing. If we get time, I can show you the search also. Okay, sure. So one more small thing that I will quickly discuss is that जो यहाँ पे discuss कर लेते हैं. So basically, going forward, while reading use effect की definition, you'll read that on multiple occasions it will be said. Okay. my tab is not working. Anyway, so you'll hear this that let's type it here only. You'll hear that use effect is also used to handle side effects, right? So this side effect is nothing. We have already covered these things. Let's say you have a function, right? Let's call it greet function, right? So in this, if we do, give me a second. Yeah. चलो so क्या करें तुम हाँ console.log a plus b ठीक so this is just a basic function right एक basic function है it has no relation with outside कोई मतलब नहीं है it just runs itself and it ends itself right but now if I attach a code here where it fetches with a URL now does it has relation with outside also outside of this function also right it will have to do something aside from what it usually do right so these things that happen outside of this function are given a name that is called side effects similarly let's say if I do set interval don't you think this is a side effect also because if I set interval of hello world say hello world after every 2 milliseconds again just writing a pseudo code so even though this function ends this is gonna keep on running up until you clear it right तो these things जो कि function के outside काम करती है those are called side effects similarly these components they are nothing but a function right so if you have things like this they are going to be called side effects right so this is what you're going to read so isn't the statement true even कि use effect manages side effects also yes it is right similarly we can have like we can use whenever you want to use set interval set timeout and all so you'll look for use effect for it right तो जब भी ऐसा कुछ करना हो you'll do it in use effect only clear clear all right so all right that's given that that's out of the way so there's one more thing so let's create a separate component for that. Let's discuss this in counter component. app.jsx. Let's import counter. Okay. So remember this counter. Remember this counter. Counter में क्या counter खाली क्यों है? Counter खाली इसलिए है क्योंकि there is no state. Okay. So let's give it some state. Let's give it some state. This will be. Oh wait a second. Count and set count. You are accepting it. अच्छा कोई नहीं let's give them their own states so let count and set count equals to use state and this will be 0 ठीक so everything's working fine again now let's say if I have set let's say interval right set interval over here let's say I'm writing use effect so you know कि side effect कुछ भी होगा that's gonna happen inside use effect right it's going to be like a chamber जहाँ पे आप side effects कर सकते हो and over here you'll have a dependency array so now counter के basis पे यार किस चीज के लिए use effect set interval use कर सकते हैं कोई idea maybe we can use it to print right console करने के लिए oh, not this maybe we can use it to print right let's go here let's clarify it right ठीक है so over here what I can say is whenever a change is happening I want to print set interval I want to set a set interval and what the set interval does it basically consoles the count right and it consoles the count every 1 millisecond clear so now in this case let me refresh it once again the requested module does not provide an export name of. अच्छा, चलो कोई नहीं. Export that, export display. I mean, we removed that piece of code, that's why it given an error. Const display. It's an empty function, nothing else. ताकि हम just error fix कर सकें, right? ठीक है. तो this thing runs for the very first time. If I increment it, then वो increment होगा. Then if I increment it again, decrement it again, this happens. But again, whenever I increment or decrement it, why isn't it printing the new increment, new value? Why is it still printing the old value? Because this set interval is running just once the page is loading. And when this set interval was called for very first time, what was the state of this count? Everyone, guys, please, just last thing that we're doing, last topic. Again, I'll start from scratch once again. This set interval has dependency array of nothing, empty, right? So whenever this useEffect is being called, this set interval will be mounted, but with the original value of count, which was 0. So even if I increment it, that value won't increase. Any idea how we can increase that value? Give it a dependency of count. Whenever this count changes, we are resetting this useEffect. Make sense or not? Make sense? All right. So let's do that. Let's do that. So whenever I do count, in this case, if I increment it, it takes that increment value, right? But again, these are some behavior that we don't need. हम हर render specific behavior चाहते हैं. We need a render specific behavior. So in that case, what we'll have to do, once we re-render the component, we'll need to remove this set interval, right? And how do we remove a set interval? By giving it an ID, clear interval. Remember that, right? So let's say we are calling it int me, so interval ID, let's call it interval ID, and this is given to this thing. Now, useEffect also provides cleanup. जब आपको component re-render करता है, when it gets unmounted, what you can do, you can pick previous code, whatever was running, and you can clean it up, right? And useEffect में क्या होता है? All you have to do is you just have to write a return statement. Now this return statement will hold that cleanup. So what we want to do, whenever we are returning it, we are returning clear interval, and we'll just pass that interval ID. Right? So if I refresh it again, if I click on it, will get updated, and if I click on it, what next value update करेगा? Clear? So whenever I'm clicking on this count, my entire component is getting re-rendered. ठीक है, चलो यहाँ पे let's note it down, guys. I think you are losing me. First step, component is mounted, right? Component mount हुआ, useEffect is gonna be approached. useEffect will be approached. So it's gonna start the set interval. Set interval starts. What's the value that it has for count? 0, right? Then it checks for dependency array. Dependency array has count as a dependent. Yes. That means whenever count is updated, basically जब भी count update होगा, state will get updated. That means re-render will happen. Re-render का मतलब क्या होता है? Your component will get unmounted and then mounted again. यही होगा. Your function will be just called again, right? So next time, what return in useEffect will basically clean up clean up whatever was left in the last component. So in last component, we were leaving the set interval, right? And it was also being observed in next intervals also, because set interval is a web API. वो browser के through manage होता है, right? So it will stay there up until you run a clear interval on it. So we write this function in return statement. This function has a name. It's called cleanup function. Right? What this cleanup function will do, it will run the last time, एक very last time it will run once your component is unmounted. So remember return statements, it runs at the very end. और वैसे ही it destroys the function as soon as it runs. So whenever this return statement will run, it will unmount this entire setup, but after, for this piece of code, clearing that specific interval. Clear? That's why now for a specific render, first time we'll get 0. Next time if I increment it, we won't get 0, 1 again. It will get cleaned up and only 1 will print. Similarly, 2 will print next time. Clear? Because the last interval is getting cleaned. So this is called cleanup function. So again, finally concluding your use effect, this is all that happens in use effect. Use effect comes with two things in its hand. एक dependency array, and what's the second thing that it has? A cleanup function, right? Dependency array basically re-renders the component and run the use effect code whenever a dependent state is updated. Is this statement true? Let me zoom it out a bit. Is this statement true? Everyone? Everyone, guys, everyone. Again, if you have a doubt, please let me know. That's fine, ma'am. Doubt bata do. Does dependency array does this? Yes. And what does cleanup function does? Cleans up the component with a return statement once the component is unmounted. Okay, so these are just the two properties that happens with use effect. I hope everyone is fine with it. So now going forward, you can start implementing even set intervals, set timeouts and all in your system. Clear? Now again, this return can be conditional based. You can have a button जो कि clean up कर दे. So based on if and else condition, you can have that. They can be searched next using use effect. Yes, you can now do everything. You can now do everything. Can you show unmount phase? I would, but I haven't introduced you guys to React Dev Tools. Right? The next session, I'll introduce you guys and I'll show. But unmount phase, just think of it as a phase where this function is re-rendered. Clear? Alright. Any other doubts, guys? Anything else? Doubt regarding loader. Let's take it up in stand-up. Take stand-up में बात करते हैं इसके बाद. Alright, ठीक है. So